Everybody, Mr. Rowlands here. I'm really sad today because it's my last day filming English lessons. But I'm also really excited because from Monday I'll be recording the maths lessons, which I'm really excited about. So I've got mixed emotions. I'm sad, but I'm also very, very excited to do maths. Now, because it's my last English lesson, it means it's your last opportunity to show me how much you've learned this week in our instructions lessons. Okay, so are you ready to get this going? Because I am. Let's go!
Right, so what you're going to need for the lesson, you're going to need something to write with and paper, lined paper if possible, but if you don't have lined paper then don't worry about it. You're also going to need the imperative verbs and the time connectives word maps, which can be found on the Year 5 section of the Online Learning on the Grange website. They will also be on some of the slides in this video, but I think it is important that you have them in front of you as well, okay? So at this point, as I say every single day, if you do not have all of these things, please pause the video, go and get them as they are very important for today's lesson, and then press play when you are ready to continue. So the first thing we're going to do is a recap. Okay, we're going to be recapping all the knowledge which you have been taught this week. Okay, now it's no good that I just teach you something once and we don't go over it again. Otherwise, you're not going to remember it, and therefore you're not going to gain a strong understanding. So the recap helps us to gain a very strong understanding. So I have 4 questions for you here. First question: why do we put instructions in chronological order? Number 2, why do we use imperative verbs in our instructions? Number 3, what are time connectives? Number 4, why do we use time connectives in our instructions? Now, yesterday I asked you to just think about these. Today I actually want you to write the answers to these questions. Again, I want you to write them at the top of your page. Now remember, I did give you those really clear explanations and definitions yesterday, so if you can remember them, please use them. As remember, when we are trying to explain things and define things, it is important that we are very clear. So please pause the video, complete this task, and then press play when you are ready to move on. Excellent, so we're going to go through the answers now. So why do we use instructions in chronological? Why do we put instructions in chronological order? We write instructions in chronological order because to follow them successfully, we must complete each step in the correct time order. Why do we use imperative verbs in instructions? We use imperative verbs in instructions to ensure that the reader knows exactly what to do. Step 3, what are time connectives? Time connectives are words that help us to understand when something is or needs to happen. And step 4, why do we use time connectives in our when writing instructions? We use time connectives when writing instructions because they tell the reader when they need to complete each step. Now, I'm sure most of you have done very well on this, but if you haven't done as well as you may have liked, please send me an email so I can provide you with that extra support. Excellent. So in today's lesson, we are going to be writing instructions in chronological order using imperative verbs, time connectives, and bullet points or numbers. Okay, so your second task is to write the LI and the date. So please do this underneath the recapping which you have just done. Okay, so please pause the video, complete this task, and then press play when you're ready to continue. Excellent, welcome back. So our starter today is to rewrite this sentence correcting the grammar and spelling errors. So here we have a sentence which has grammar and spelling errors, and your task is to rewrite it. Okay, so write it again. Okay, correcting the grammar and spelling errors. Okay, so please pause the video, complete this task, and then press play when you're ready to go through this sentence. So I is the first thing that needed to change. So we need a capital I as it is the start of our sentence. So we need a capital letter at the start of every sentence. Okay, love was spelled incorrectly, so that is the correct spelling. Countryside needed an E on the end, so it was the wrong spelling. Hampshire needed a capital H as it is the name of a place, so we need a capital letter. And lastly, we needed a full stop at the end because that is the end of our sentence. Okay, so it should read, I love venturing out into the countryside to smell the luscious green grass. The countryside in Hampshire is one I particularly adore. You might be looking at this now and being like, Mr. Olins, why are we already doing a task? Okay, the reason is because this is the last lesson in our unit of instructions. Okay, so I want to see how much you have learned. So this is an opportunity for you to show me how much you have learned. So this is your task. You're going to write a set of instructions in chronological order using imperative verbs, time connectives, and bullet points or numbers. Now, as you can see, this is a task for both Superstars and Bluezone. There is one slight difference which I will reveal very soon. Okay, do not worry, I'm not going to just leave you to go and do this by yourself. I'm going to go through this with you step by step. So for most of it, you're actually going to be doing it whilst on the video lesson with me. Lovely. So let's move on to step 1. Step 1 is to decide what your instructions will be on. It must be something that you can do in your house. Okay, now that's very important because you are going to actually be using these instructions yourself to make or create or whatever your instructions are for. You're going to be doing it in your house. Okay, so the first thing to do is to decide what your instructions will be on. Here are some examples. You don't have to use these. You can if you want. I just give these as a bit of help. So making a cake, making a robot, turning on the television, turning on a computer, or making a curry. So please pause the video, have a think what you want your instructions to be on. Remember, it must be something that you can do in your house, and then press play when you're ready to move on to step 2. Step 2 is to write the title of your instructions in your book. Okay, so just to let you know at this point, I have also done this myself. So whilst I'm moving through the steps with you, I'm going to be showing you what I did. Okay, so that should give you a bit of help. So step 2 is to write the title of your instructions in your book. So I decided I wanted to create my instructions for how to turn on a Samsung television. So my title, which I've put at the top of my page, but you'll just do it under the last thing you've done, is turning on a Samsung television. So I've just written it like that. So whatever yours is, you are now going to write your title. So please pause the video, complete that task, and then when you're ready, press play to move on to step 3. Step 3 is to decide how many steps you will have. Okay, so how many steps are you going to have in your instructions? Now, this is the key differentiation between Superstars and Bluezone. If you are a Superstar, you can have a maximum of 6 steps. Okay, so the most amount of steps you can have is 6. If you are in the Bluezone, the minimum amount of steps you can have is 5. So the least amount of steps you can have is 5. And I've put a point at the end. If you add more or less when writing the instructions out, do not worry. So if you're writing like, oh, I really want to add another step, okay, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Okay, you can add it. That's absolutely fine. So now I want you to think to yourself, how many steps do I want to use? So please pause the video, think of that, and then press play when you are ready to move on to step 4. Step 4 is to decide whether you're going to use bullet points or numbers. Okay, so these are numbers and these are bullet points. Remember, we discussed yesterday why we need to use numbers and bullet points. It's to help the reader know when to do each step. Okay, so just to let you know, I decided to use bullet points, but it's completely up to you. So pause the video, okay, have a think, do I want to use bullet points or numbers, and then press play when you're ready to move on to step 5. Now, step 5 is to write the bullet points or numbers on the left-hand side of the page. Okay, now the number of bullet points or numbers you're going to use depends on how many steps you have. So I've decided I'm going to have 4 steps, and I've decided I'm going to use bullet points. So I'm going to write 4 bullet points, and you can see that very clearly here. Okay, so if you had 6 steps and you wanted to use numbers, you'd write numbers 1 to 6 down here. Okay, or if you had 1 to 7, if you were using bullet points and you had 7 steps, you'd do 7 bullet points here. So it's completely up to you. So please pause the video, complete that, and then press play when you're ready to move on to step 6. Excellent. So step 6 is to decide what imperative verbs you are going to use. Okay, now remember, as a little recap, imperative verbs tell us what we need to do, which is very important when we are trying to follow instructions. Now, the amount of imperative verbs you use depends on how many steps you have. Okay, so you need an imperative verb for every step you have. Okay, so I had 4 steps, so I need 4 imperative verbs. Okay, I've put these here so you can pick from here if you want, or you can choose your own. It is completely up to you. So please pause the video, have a think about what imperative verbs you are going to use, and then press play when you're ready for step 7. So step 7 is to write your imperative verbs below the numbers or bullet points. Okay, so as I said before, I had 4 steps, so I needed to have 4 imperative verbs. So the ones I've decided to use are get, wait, press, and sit, and I've written these underneath my bullet points. Okay, and if you have numbers, you'll write it underneath your numbers. Okay, so please pause the video, complete this task, and when you're ready to move on to step 8, please press play. Nice. So step 8 is to decide what time connectives you are going to use. Now remember, we use time connectives to help us understand when to complete each step. Okay, so here are some time connectives you can choose from. Okay, now with the time connectives, the same as with the imperative verbs, the amount of time connectives you're going to use depends on how many steps you have. So it's one time connective for every step. So I have 4 steps. I will therefore need 4 time connectives. Now you can choose from these, or you can choose, or you can just create, use your own or create your own. Okay, excellent. So please pause the video, have a think about this, and then press play when you are ready to move on to step 9. Fantastic. So step 9 is to write your time connectives below your imperative verbs. Okay, so as I said, okay, I had 4 steps, so I needed 4 time connectives. The ones I decided to use were first, after that, finally, and next, and I've written them underneath my imperative verbs. So please pause the video, complete this task, and when you're ready to move on to step 10, please press play. Now, step 10 is to write your instructions. Now, I'm sure this is the point where everyone's going to be like, oh no, what am I doing? Okay, but do not worry. Okay, I've given you so many tools now. You have your title, you have your numbers or bullet points, you know what imperative verbs you're going to use, you know what time connectors you're going to use. So you now need to stick everything together. So do not worry, you are going to be absolutely fine. Okay, so remember, you need to use in every sentence, you need to use time connected imperative verbs, and the whole thing needs to be in chronological order. Okay, now I have done something which I think will help you. So this is what I was doing when I was starting. So these are my first 2 steps. Okay, so firstly, sit down on a piece of furniture. Next, get your Samsung controller. Now, to make sure I knew that in every sentence I'd used a time connective and an imperative verb, I crossed them off. Okay, so if we start with the first one, firstly, when I wrote the word firstly, I was like, right, I've done my time connector, I'm going to cross it off. Cross it off. Okay? Sit. All right? Sit was my imperative verb. So once I knew I'd use that, like, great, I'm going to cross it off. Next, right? Next was my time connective. So, right, good, I've got that. So I'm going to tick that off, cross it off. And get was my next imperative verb. So I'm going to do that off, and I did that, as you'll see, I did that for all of them. Okay, so with these were my instructions. Have a read them if you want, but for every sentence, I made sure I had a time connective and a imperative verb as I ticked them off. So that's up to you if you want to do that, but I would strongly advise. So please pause the video, complete this task, be brave, you're going to be amazing, and then press play when you are ready to move on to step 11. Right, so step 11 is the time you've all been waiting for. This is the time where you're going to get somebody else to try these instructions, or you're going to do them yourself. It's up to you. Okay, now this is really important because if you give your instructions to somebody else and they're able to complete whatever you're wanting them to complete, then that means they're great instructions. And if you do it for yourself and you complete it, that means they're great instructions. So this is very important. Okay? I did this myself. Pardon me, I did this myself as well. So I'm now going to show you what happened when I did mine.
Right guys, so I'm now going to try and see if I can use my instructions to turn on the television. Okay, so here is the television. This is the Samsung television. It is currently on, so I need to turn it off. And I've got my instructions, and I'm going to put my phone here so you can see what I'm doing, hopefully. Right, so the first bullet point says, firstly, sit down on a piece of furniture. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sit down on a piece of furniture. Next, get your Samsung controller. Right, I've got my Samsung controller. The third step says, finally press the on button. Right, press the on button. Oh, that doesn't make sense. There's another step. It says after that, wait for the screen to turn on. That doesn't make sense because the third step says finally, which seems to be telling me it's the last step, but it's not the last step. What I've done there is I've put my time connective finally on the wrong step. So the time connective finally needs to be on the last step because finally means last step. And then after that it needs to go where finally is. Right, let me just mark that so I know. But apart from the time connectors being in the wrong place, the instructions have worked. Look, the screen has turned on. Super. See you in a bit.
Right, so that was my set of instructions, which actually did work, apart from the fact that I got my 2 time connectives the wrong way. That was fine. Now, as you did see, I did make one error, which was getting the time connectors the wrong way, but if that happens, there's something that we can do, which is what I did, okay? So, if you make an error, you just need to note it on the instructions. So, as you can see here, I did a little symbol, arrows going both ways, which was telling me, was to tell me that finally and after needed to change place, okay? So once you recognize the mistake, write it, and then you're going to rewrite the whole thing, correcting it as I have done here. So you can see here, I rewrote the whole instructions with the title as well and the bullet points, and after that's there, and now finally is in its right place. So at this point, guys, please pause the video, go and get somebody to do your instructions, or do it yourself, and if there are any errors at all, just mark it and then rewrite it afterwards, and then press play when you're ready to go on to the last step, and probably the most important step, which is step 13. Right, everyone, we have got to the final step. It's the final countdown. So, step 13 is to present the instructions in any way you like. You need to be creative. The best instructions will include all of the features we have worked on this week. So it needs to be in chronological order, it needs to include imperative verbs, it needs to have time connectives, and it has to have bullet points or numbers. It also needs to have great vocabulary and needs to be designed very well. So you now have your instructions, you've written them, they don't have any errors in them. Now you just need to put it on a page and make it look beautiful and very good. Okay, now the better it is, the more creative and the better designed it is, okay, the better the instructions will be. Okay, and I'm going to run a tiny little competition. Okay, the best ones will be on a video which we will put up on Monday. Okay, so myself, Miss Chloe, Miss Merchant will pick the best ones and we will put it on a separate video on Monday. So do it however you want. Do it on the computer, do it on an A3 sheet, however you want to do it. Be so creative, and you may find yourself on a video on Monday. And guys, that comes to the end of the English teaching with Mr. Rollins. Miss Kalu is going to, not Miss Kalu, Miss Merchant is going to take over on Monday, and I will be teaching maths, which is also going to be very exciting. So thank you for being with me through our English lessons, and I look forward to seeing you on a math lesson on Monday. Have a fantastic weekend, and Ramadan Mubarak to those families who are celebrating it. Goodbye.